Welcome to the Bulletproof Cashflow podcast, the go-to place to gain financial freedom through real estate investing. Here we interview investors, mentors, and entrepreneurs who share their secrets and advice to help you build passive income. Let's get into the show.
Hey everyone, this is Agostino. There's many ways to get into real estate, and some people knowingly get into the business while others become landlords by accident almost. But others take to house hacking as a way to get in. And oftentimes these are the people that realize the power of real estate, and that's when they just go all in. So today's guest is no exception. He started investing in real estate back in 2009 with a triplex, and he realized that money was literally showing up to his door. And he decided that he would make it a focus and entered real estate business in 2011, only to become financially independent by 2015. Now today, he's invested in over 480 units, and he serves as the founder of Ideal Real Estate Investing, where he helps others replace their corporate job with passive income from real estate. With all that, I'd like to welcome Eric Bowlin to the show. Hey, Eric, thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate it.
Hey, Agostino. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. So if you like what Eric has to say, you can reach him via his contact page at idealrei.com. And if you like our content, please don't forget to leave a comment and rate the show. And if you want to get your hands on one of our latest books, it's the Bulletproof Guide to Finding a Broker. Text the word freedom to 202-410-4202, and it'll send you a link, and you can go ahead and download that book. It's going to be awesome, guys. So, okay, Eric, go ahead and tell listeners about how you got your start in real estate.
Yeah, so I'll just talk a little bit because you mentioned it in the intro about money knocking on my door. So I'll start back there right at the beginning. I wanted to buy a home, actually, and I couldn't qualify for a loan. I was a full-time student. I was working on my PhD. I was in the National Guard. I was a reservist in the military, and I was a TA. And so I had a bunch of part-time jobs, and I had some income. And this is 2009, so the recession was like really we were still going down at that point, and I couldn't qualify because I had a ton of student debt and all part-time jobs. But I discovered this trick that if you get a 3 or 4 family or 2 family, the rent that the other units are getting can be added to your income to help you qualify for like a FHA loan, which is what I got. And so the 3 family actually allowed me to qualify versus I couldn't even qualify for like a crappy, cheap condo at the time. So I was able to get more property by getting a multifamily. And so that's what I got. And the plan was to sell it after I figured this is the economist in me. I'm like, the recession will end. The economy will recover. I'll sell it in a few years. I'll go buy a single family home. I'll be a normal person. And I'll be a professor somewhere. That was my plan. And that all changed because one night I was watching TV and somebody knocked on my door. It was like 9 o'clock at night, and I couldn't get into a nice neighborhood. I lived in a pretty bad neighborhood, actually. And so nobody walks around at night. Nobody knocks on doors at night. And it's like, okay, who is this? So I'm like, open a door cautiously. It's my tenant there to pay me the rent. And I wrote the receipt. I took his cash, and I would say he paid cash because he was a drug dealer. And I put the money on the table, and I realized that was the easiest money I'd ever earned at that point. I was in the military. That's where I'd earned most of my money up to that point. And I had worked really hard for every dollar I'd ever earned, like really hard, probably harder than most people because, the military is not easy. Right. And so I'm like, this is like 3 weeks worth of pay in my other jobs. And I was watching TV. And it knocked on my door. And by the end of the night, I totally forgot what we were watching. And I'm just like, this is what I want. I want money to knock on my door. I don't want to have to go out and get it. I want it to come to me like this. And like my mindset shifted. And I realized there's an easier way to do this. And so that's kind of how I made the decision to get into real estate. And then 2011 is when I got full-time because I deployed to Afghanistan in between. Deployed to Afghanistan, came back, dropped out of my program. All my professors thought I was stupid. Everybody thought I was crazy. And I dropped out of the program, the guaranteed job, pension, health benefits, all that, got rid of all that, and picked up doing real estate full-time.
And that's the thing though, too, you went against the grain, right? So all your life you're told, go to school, be a good student, do your 40 hours, and that's it. I mean, I think so many people are told that. I was told that too.
Oh, yeah.
And for the early part of my career, I was doing the same thing, you know, doing the whole corporate job thing. And it took, in your case, an actual real life example of money knocking on your door and someone
Yeah.
handing you a bunch of cash, right?
Yeah.
So that's beautiful. Awesome. I mean, that's one way to get into the business, right? I mean, you get started with smaller deals. It's great. People do just jump right into the big deals too. That's okay too. Now, tell me about your second deal then. So it sounds like that you said this was probably what, like a D area then or something like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It had transitioned a little bit. It was definitely a D. There was like a really well-known gang just 2 streets away from me, but the police had taken care of that 5 or 6 years prior, and most of those buildings got knocked down. They redeveloped them, but it would still have like D-class tenants. It was not a great area, but the great thing, it was within walking distance of my university, so that's why I bought it. And my next deal, so somewhere when I went to Afghanistan, I must have read 50 books on real estate while I was there, because I had nothing else to do really. When you're not on missions, you're not doing patrols, I'm reading books. And somewhere in between me getting that check or the cash and then me getting home, real estate investing became house flipping in my head. And so obviously looking back now, I'm like, well, house flipping is not really investing. Like, you can make money doing it, but
It's a
it's not
job,
really,
right?
like, it's not money knocking on my door. Right. So
Right.
somehow that's just what it became. And so I picked up a house flip, and it was terrible. I made like $1,000 in 6 months. And I'm like, this is the worst job ever. And so, so I sold that, and I'm like crazy thinking back about it. But I had used every dollar I'd saved. I'd borrowed a bunch of money and maxed out all my credit cards, which is fine, doing your first house flip. But then I bought, more importantly, not my second deal, but my third deal was my next multifamily. It's a 4-family. And I had scheduled that to close to purchase the same week I had scheduled to sell the house flip, and I needed the proceeds from the sale in order to close on the next one. So like, I sold one on Tuesday and bought the next one on Thursday, and didn't think like, oh, money might need time to clear, or like, what if the closing gets pushed back? And so I had no money, but right that week, right before, I had less than $200 in the bank account, no credit available. I couldn't even put gas in my car. Like, I had nothing. And that 4-family, that's when everything changed for me. I bought that with all the cash from the first deal onto the second deal, got rid of all the tenants, did a little bit of work. I wouldn't call it rehab. It was more like carpets
Light
and
rehab,
paint.
like, yeah, paint, flooring, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'd call it more of an apartment turnover. Like,
Yeah,
you kick
yeah,
everybody out, you got to turn over the unit.
yeah.
So it's not like a full rehab or anything, just did some turnovers. And I spent like $15,000 total on 4 units. And
Not bad.
they're old properties. This is Massachusetts, so they were built in the 1890s. So like $15,000 on an 1890s property means the property was really well maintained, right? And and I refinanced it. It was worth like close to $100,000 more than what I bought it for. Like, so it had more than doubled in value. Cashed out, put like $30,000 in my pocket, and I was cash flowing like $2,000 a month.
Nice.
And for a person who had no job and no income, it's life changing. $2,000, plus $30,000 or $40,000 cash in the bank, and that's when I'm like,
and that was local too, right? That deal was local for you.
It was, yeah, it was right down not down the street. It was like one town away. It was about a 15-minute drive from where I lived at the time.
Yeah.
So it was just totally life changing. I'm like, okay, this is investing. I figured it out now. And so,
and now, would you say then for these smaller deals, I mean, I get people that show up at our live events all the time, and one of the biggest struggles when it comes with smaller deals is management, right? And it's easy to buy a deal compared to running it for 10 years straight and having it turn a profit every single month. That's hard. That's work, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Although I think on smaller deals, like 10 units and less, if you manage it yourself, it's not as difficult because you're personally screening it. They people to get to know you, that kind of thing. Would you say that that's accurate then in a case like this? Because it sounds like, you're local, you can keep an eye on it. Like, you are personally keeping an eye on it. What would you say about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was a lot of work, and it was something I didn't realize at the time. Like, this was a journey. Like I didn't walk in day one and said, this is how you invest. 10, 11, 12 years ago, there was books, but there really wasn't all these podcasts and websites. Like a lot of this didn't exist. So you're just figuring it out as you go.
As you go.
And the management was something that I was doing on my own, but even though it took up a lot of my time, I didn't have a job because I had dropped everything I was doing. And so it filled my time that I had available, which was okay at that time. But it also helped me develop the systems that I needed to be competitive, because it was Massachusetts. Massachusetts is very tenant friendly. So my competitive advantage, or my comparative advantage, was that I had all my processes and everything locked down. Like I really focused on all of my paperwork and making sure everything was done by the book. A lot of the mom and pops, properties, all the small multifamily, most of the people don't know what they're doing. And so I was able to go and take places that had bad tenants and remove those tenants quickly because I had all my documents in order, and I was able to do that. And so I was able to kind of carve out a niche.
Yeah, I think it sounds like you focused on tenant underwriting, getting the right people in there, first of all, right? Doing the background checks, all that. But then you operated it efficiently as well by creating your checklists and really keeping an eye on making sure payments were handled properly. And I mean, it's work. It's work, but if you turned it over to a property manager, I find anyway, that they won't care about your 4-unit as much as you will, right?
Yeah.
Like they're typically looking to do these giant 100+ unit type deals. They'll watch that one because there's cash flow. When it comes to smaller deals, a little bit tougher, right?
Yeah, for sure. But in that particular market, there's a lot of these properties, and there's not a lot of the big apartment complexes in the older inventory in the Northeast like that. That's just the way it is. So I didn't look for property management at that time. So, but I agree with you, that is usually an issue. And as far as tenant underwriting, I think that's the number one thing that I never hand over to anybody. I still screen all of my tenants that are in. I'm on a couple of apartment complexes. I don't screen those tenants, but for my personal portfolio with no partners, I screen every single person. And in 10 years, I've only had to evict one person that I selected, and I've had hundreds and hundreds of tenants.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've had people leave. I've had people bad terms. I've had damages, but I've never had to evict. They've all left on their own. And so that system is really, like, that process is really working because I'm extremely selective for them. And I think it's the most important thing.
That's awesome. No, let's talk about that. So I totally agree. It's early in my career, I was doing the same thing, and you just go with your gut. You could feel if that person's a good person or not, which is different than how property management does it. I mean, man, I'll tell you, out of all my stuff, I mean, I have an eviction almost every week of some kind, I don't even want to talk about the other things we have going on at those those properties.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right, though. I think that aside from gut, there's also like a checklist you follow, right? I'm assuming. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about how do you go through your selection process when you're, I guess, like you put up an ad somewhere, you get a response. How do you handle that whole scenario from beginning to end?
So I don't do any of the showings myself anymore, but when I started, I did all the showings, and you get your immediate first impression of the person based on kind of how they act and how, if they're polite and considerate to you versus, kind of rude or condescending. And so you can get kind of a feeling. You can't really reject somebody based on that legally, but you get a good feel, and you kind of know how deep you want to dig on them based on that. And so it all starts there with that feeling. And then you might take some notes on the back of their application, or just on a sheet of paper if you do an electronic application. So there's that. The second thing is I tell all of my tenants, or applicants, I should say, that there is a full screening process, background check, etc. And in a small properties, like, that's not common. And so that scares away a lot of people right there. They never fill out an application. Anybody who thinks that something might come up will often just avoid it. So that's kind of self-selecting them out. A lot of people that then do apply, in the application, it's kind of a long application. It's like 3 pages long. And for some reason, if there's somebody's going to lie, there will be an inconsistency somewhere on the application, because people aren't good at lying. Most people, they'll lie on one line and then kind of forget about it by the second page, and then they'll like answer slightly differently. I don't know how to explain it, but you can almost always find a inconsistency, and inconsistencies are reasons to reject. So I don't have to reject, but if I choose to reject, I can say, well, they said this and this, they both can't be true. So lying on application is a reason to reject, right? So it always gives you kind of that legal out. If somebody says, you have to accept me, I'm qualified, I'd be like, well, you technically lied. And it says right there in the last line that any errors or any omissions or lying or whatever is subject for that. So that's kind of that. Background checks, do background checks. We do credit checks, but I look at credit in an interesting way. I don't look at the credit score necessarily. A lot of the tenants have very poor scores, like really low. So we're really looking more at their credit burden and what they're able to pay versus their income. So I've rejected people with 750 credit scores because they had $2,000 worth of loan payments and student loans and car payments and all this other stuff, but they had immaculate credit because they always paid on time. And then when you actually looked at their income versus their bills, I'm like, there's like enough to pay the rent plus like $200. You can't even pay groceries. Like you can't afford it. So anyway, yeah.
So you're almost like you're doing a little budget thing on you're doing their budget for them.
Yeah, a lot of times.
Basically.
But I get tenants that have really poor credit that are great tenants.
Yeah.
And then sometimes the really good credit people are bad tenants. Sometimes as well. So I don't look just at the credit score. I like to try to think about it more like holistically.
No, that's a good way to do it too. I mean, there's people that I've rented to when I first started off anyway. It was, I mean, these people at low income, they stayed at that place for 14 years. They paid the mortgage for 14 years and never had a problem with them, until the end. Then we had to evict them. But 14 years, good run.
Vacancy for 14 years, it kind of pays for the eviction.
Yeah, it was okay. Yeah, it was all right. It was fine. It was fine. Those are the tenants that you want. Those are the tenants that you want. They basically paid half the mortgage.
Yeah, and sometimes the people that are overqualified, you don't necessarily want because they're going to stay there for a year and they're going to go buy a house.
Right.
And so sometimes going more toward the middle group of people gets you a more person who's going to stay for 4, 5, 6 years. At reasonable rents, pay the rent bumps as you increase them every year. Like that's the kind of tenant you want. Not that you can't like legally reject a person because they earn too much, but like that doesn't mean that's not who I'm like aiming and targeting with my like.
Right. Well, because exactly. You're trying to get that tenant to stick around for 2, maybe even 3 years if possible. So, if they're going to earn too much, then if you're bouncing around, that's the last thing you want is to have them leave after a year, have to turn the unit again and stick another person in there, and maybe they stick around for a year. So you're trying to minimize those turns. So do you have any specific questions or things you might say to them to feel them out, to see how long they plan on sticking around? Or you just outright ask them? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah. So you can't really ask them, at least in Massachusetts, not that I'm aware of. But you just kind of you can just kind of look at them, not like look at them. I mean, I don't actually see the tenants anymore, but on the application, you just look. And sometimes you got to take them because they're the most qualified and you can't discriminate. But sometimes you just say, they're too good. They have too much money in the bank. They have too high of a credit score. Like they're just too good of applicants. Like I'm going to see if there's somebody else that I can go for. It's not common, but it has happened a few times.
Right. So you're almost trying to find someone that's damaged.
A little bit, yeah. I'm really targeting. So what I do is most of my properties are in C-class areas, and I really make them the nicest ones in the street or in the neighborhood. So when I list them, I'll have 50 people show up the first day to look at them, and then I've got anybody that I want to choose from, and I can choose the best person because I've got the best looking properties at similar rents as what's out there. And so, I'm really targeting solid working class type people. That's the properties I'm going in those neighborhoods. And those are the tenant base that's in those neighborhoods. Now, occasionally you get somebody looking just kind of for some cheap rent because they want to save money. And those are like the ones that kind of stand out. They don't really fit in with the rest of the group. But yeah, so you want somebody who's not perfect credit or whatever. The only thing I don't do exceptions on is evictions within like the last 7 or 10 years.
Right. Right.
If they have an eviction, if they're like 40 and they had an eviction when they're 22 or something like that, like as long as they're honest, I ask, have you ever received a notice to quit? Have you ever had a summons and complaint? Like, have you ever been evicted? I ask 3 or 4 questions about it. And if they should say yes, and they should just say it was 14 years ago or whatever, and then I'll still consider. If they say no and I find it in my records check, then I'm going to reject them automatically for deceiving me.
Yeah, we do the same thing. So something you've already said a few times now is that you're not really hands-on on that whole process anymore, right? So do you have a group now that handles all that for you?
Yeah. So what we do on my portfolio in Massachusetts, which is about 50 units, is, and those are the ones that I'm hands-on with because that's 100% ownership. I don't have partners on those. So there's like more of a hybrid approach. I don't have full-time, I don't have a management company, but because I'm from there, I have a large network of people that I knew back when I lived there. And so all I do is if there's a work order, it comes online or via text message, and it just gets forwarded to the appropriate person. I have a person who shows all the properties for a flat rate. I have a handyman. I got all the contractors and tradespeople you need. So it's really just management at this point is really just forwarding emails.
Yeah, and letting someone else take care of it, whatever it is. Then 50 units is still somewhat easy to control.
Yeah,
right?
That's like that middle ground. Like, it's small enough you can control, but if you grow any bigger, it's too big to manage, and you got to hire people, but it's too small to really hire people.
Yep.
And so
that's exactly it. I mean, and that's why I often tell people that even in our events, or I'm talking to someone that wants to scale up, I find that it's easy to do, like, say, a duplex to 10 units, and it's good to outsource 80 units plus.
Yeah.
That middle ground, it's too big for a single person to operate, and it's too small for a property manager to care.
Yeah. Unless you get a few of them together.
Yeah. They got to be together, meaning nearby. Like they got to be in close proximity.
Right. Yeah. We're not talking opposite sides of the state or something.
Right.
Within a couple miles of each other.
Yeah. That's absolutely key for those people out there that are looking to scale up. Yeah. You kind of have to consider that, because management is by far one of the most difficult components when it comes to all this.
And there's also another piece to that management is it's not only managing of the units, but also in the quantity of assets.
Mm-hmm.
Managing 50 single families is different than managing 5-10 families. And so even if it's the same number of units, just the more assets you have, I kind of have a theory that a person can only manage somewhere between like 10 and 15 actual physical assets. And so, if you do start off in a small stuff, which is fine, I think it's great. It's better to start small than to not start at all. Right. So, but you kind of get to that point, and then you got to start thinking, I'm going to sell off a few of these and turn a couple 2 and 3 families into 10 or 15, and just keep the number of assets manageable.
Yeah. So tell me about your portfolio then. So you have your portfolio locally that you keep an eye on, and then you have other ones with partners, right? So did you do that? Did you get the partners after you grew your portfolio? Then you said, well, I want to get bigger, so I need to get partners, or are you still looking locally to pick up stuff?
I do both. So I don't really have a very strong desire to build out like a large, like a syndication team and have my own asset managers and accountant and all these people on staff or whatever. It's important to me to maintain my lifestyle, the travel and the things that I want to do. So I like doing that, but I only engage in it in a way that I can be a little bit more hands-off with them. And so that I leverage other partners and work with other people on like syndications. But I still look with the small stuff, because you can make a decent chunk of change on a 5-family. I mean, I did one last year, made like $175,000 on a $100,000 property.
Nice.
And, it's $200,000 all in, and it's worth $400,000, and it cash flows $2,000 a month. It's like, okay, you gotta, to say no to $200,000 and $2,000 a month, you gotta be like really wealthy. And I'm not wealthy enough to say no to that. So, so awesome. It's like, it's kind of hard to say no. So those deals pop up, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So tell me a little bit then about how you were able to get into your first partner deal. Then how did that come about?
Yeah, so I moved to Texas in 2015, and I actually picked up a job for about 9 months because I'd never lived just on my passive income. I had always been very actively involved. Did that for 9 months, quit. Then I said, now what? And so I started like doing research and figuring out, and then I heard about this syndication thing.
Hmm.
And so I'm like, okay, up until that point, everything I'd ever read about it for the prior 5 years was like, you'll go to jail if you do it wrong, so be careful. And I'm like, and then in Texas, it's really popular. A lot of people in Texas do
Yeah,
it. So
it
I
is.
started going to some meetups, and people are like, I'm meeting people doing like 200 unit apartment complexes. And I'm like, what, you can do that? I thought you were going to go to jail. Like, and I know you just have to do these couple things. And I'm like, oh, is that simple? And I mean, it's obviously more complicated than that, but I'm
Right.
like, so it kind of overcame the fear. And so that lead into, I decided in 2017, finally, I'm like, 2017 is the year I'm doing a syndication deal. I'm going to do an apartment complex. So I started networking. I was networking 2-3 times a week, maybe more. I did multiple conferences around the country. I was attending, and I was just trying to find somebody to work with. And I was trying to leverage kind of my operational experience, my numbers background in economics, my ability to underwrite, and just kind of leverage those things together. And eventually I did meet a person at a conference that 4 or 6 months later, we were still talking. We were looking at some deals together. And then we ended up, he had some other partners. 5 of us ended up going in together and doing 192 units in San Antonio.
Nice. Good, good, good. So what was your role in that whole deal then?
Yeah. So it's really interesting how that developed. I was in the Dallas market, and this other guy was from California, and he was looking in Dallas market. And then the guy that I met at the conference, and then he would call me up once in a while and be like, hey, what do you think about this deal and these numbers that I have? You know, the market. I'm like, oh yeah, I already looked at that last week. This is what I have. And then did this a few times. And then I kind of became the guy that he knew that was in the boots on the ground in Dallas, that knew every deal in the market. Eventually we were both putting LOIs on the same property, and we decided to kind of put our LOIs together and just go in it instead of compete. We didn't get that deal, but he got this idea. He's like, well, I'm working with a person like you in like 4 markets right now. Maybe we can all work together. We can increase the size of the units because we're only looking at like 80 to 100 units at that time. He's like, if we all come together with our ability to raise capital and look at our own individual markets, we can probably go up to like 200 units. And so we all got onto a call and we all said, okay, let's the 5 of us work together. And so we each looked in our market for deals, but the agreement was that whoever finds the deal first that works and gets under agreement will all go together on that deal. So on that deal, I had a much more limited role, other than making sure the analysis made sense and raising capital on the deal. My role was more looking in Dallas market, but we ended up getting the deal in San Antonio.
But you know what though? The thing is that there's so many people out there right now. They're afraid to pull the trigger on the one unit, but you did it, and now you're networking and you're talking to these people out of state, and you're delivering some sort of value.
Mm-hmm.
That's the key. That's why I tell people all the time in this business, it's all about delivering value that so these people would want to invest with you. That's basically it. You're raising the capital, you're the boots on the ground, you are dealing with the brokers. If something crops up, you drive over there and you handle whatever the problem is,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because they're not nearby to actually do it. It's huge, absolutely huge.
Yeah, absolutely. I like to tell people you got to find something that you're comparably good at that somebody else might need, whatever that is, and then you just got to find the person who needs that.
That's it.
So if you're a numbers person, you can underwrite deals. You can underwrite 100 deals when somebody else gets confused on whatever, like stress testing or projecting, long-term trends or whatever. Maybe you got that, but they're really good operationally. You work together, or maybe you're the boots on the ground operational guy. You need the whatever. You just got to find that, and then network until you find that team.
Right. Now tell
Support.
me about the networking now. So how are you still networking today, or like how much networking did you have to do to get into that deal, and what are you doing today now to continue your networking? Let's go into with that.
Yeah, so I did a lot of networking. I must have like 3 or 4 days a week I was out somewhere. I was basically never home. Uh, Back in 2017, I must have done 6 or 7 or 8 conferences that year, and so I was really busy with it. Now I kind of network differently, but I also have a little bit more of I have a more online presence. My blog is quite big. A lot of people contact me through that. I'm on a lot of podcasts. So now my network, I've just changed it. I just leverage differently that people come to me instead of me going to them. And I also founded a meetup in Boston. I only go up like 4 times a year, but it's the biggest meetup in real estate meetup in New England. So I get a lot of credibility from that and everything else. So it's a lot easier for me to network because people are coming to me.
Yes, yes, yes. So, and that's the thing though too, is that you are now a subject matter expert, but you're not really faking it because you've actually done it.
Yeah.
So, which is common in this business. There's a lot of guys that are faking this and so to speak, but you've actually done it, and you have a value proposition for someone who wants to invest in an area, a syndicator or whatever, and you're actually there. You're boots on the ground. You know, you can actually get things done locally, which is huge,
Yeah. And there are a lot of people, especially in the syndicating space, that project something that they're not, which is not something you want to do ever, because when you get found out, you'll just lose credibility.
Small world, man. It's a
Oh
small
yeah,
world.
there's so many deals that somebody's doing it and they're investing it as a passive, and I'm like, oh, which deal? And I'm like, oh, I'm familiar with that. I'm like, is that so and so? And they're like, oh yeah, and like the people.
Oh yeah,
I mean, there's a lot of people, but it's still pretty small.
it is. It is. It is. It is. I forget what the exact number is, but there's not as many multifamily assets as you would think there are. I mean, there's
Yeah,
enough, but it's true. I mean, these larger multifamily assets, there's not like, hundreds of thousands of these things lying around, so it's usually the same assets trading over and over and over again.
for sure.
That's
Especially if you go to one market. I mean, DFW is a big market, but if you go to any other city that's 1 million people or whatever, and you're operating there, there's the the brokers know every deal, the property managers know every asset, the all the players know each other, and they know the assets. It's much smaller. It's much tighter knit.
That's right. That's right. So tell me about what your current market now is. You're still buying, you're still active on your own deals,
Mhm.
right? Are you still syndicating deals there in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, so last year, and let's see, end of 2018, 2019, I was focused more on raising capital on smaller deals that I was doing in Massachusetts, because the market is really getting um, really difficult for finding apartment complexes, and I didn't see anything that I was comfortable with that I went after that year. So I went after a couple of small stuff. That's my bread and butter. Small capital raises, really just kind of like stuff you send out an email and all the money's there in 3 hours. Like, it's small bite-sized things, but still making money on them. And so that's kind of what I was focused on last year. This year I got some stuff in the works, but nothing I can really like talk about. I'm possibly going to be maybe doing a small fund to go after smaller deals, because that seems to be what's working right now, but nothing that like is formal or that like I could point anybody in a direction about. It's just kind of in the talks and the works.
Right, 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 right. So you're talking about an investment fund then, where it's like a blind pool,
Yeah,
right? So for
especially in
those,
these smaller assets.
yeah, 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 yeah. So for those listening, what you're basically doing is it's a blind pool. It's a fund that's set up. They just basically take money from people. They pool their money into a fund, and then under the premise that you are going to buy a certain asset with a certain return, right? So it might be like, I don't know what you're doing, like maybe five plexes in a certain area with
Right.
this cap rate to deliver this type of return,
Yeah, it would all be defined out. So when somebody invests their money, they know exactly what type of assets you're getting, what the expected projected returns are, and all those things, just like you would invest in a syndication. But sometimes the cost, when you're buying a $200,000 or $500,000 asset, the attorney's fees and the PPM and all that stuff on on a property of that size often will kill the deal.
Yeah, for sure. That's the downside. That's the downside with those blind pools on those smaller deals, is that it might work well, like say a triple net lease type scenario, which is a whole different that's a whole different discussion.
Yeah.
But when you're doing multifamily, yeah, it's a whole different scenario.
But I've been finding there's still a lot of opportunity in that in the markets that I work in, and there's a lot of return potential on those. So that's something I'm thinking about. You got a niche, you got to find your area that you're better at than anybody else, and that is something I'm still finding good deals like on a regular basis. I don't have to be pounding down doors, and it's something I can kind of do with my eyes closed. So that's something I'm considering for this year. You're actually the first person that I'm telling this publicly.
Hey man, that's good then. So maybe by the time people hear this podcast and they want to invest with you, they know where to find you, right?
Yeah, well, they can look it up. If it's available, they'll know.
There we go. All right. Well, cool. Good. So maybe tell me like about mindset. Now, what are some of the limiting beliefs that stop people from reaching what you have done? I mean, there's so many investors, young investors that really want to do this, but I don't know. I mean, they seem to be scared, or I'm not sure why they refuse to take the step. But I mean, what do you think it is?
I think fear is definitely the number one thing. And I think more than just pointing out fear, because most people innately know that it's the people around you. And so most people have friends or family, and they mean well, but they'll tell you shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
And they're not trying to sabotage you. They're not like trying to hurt you most of the time. I mean, sure, somebody is like that, but most of your family actually just genuinely cares about you, and they believe that it's not possible. And so they try to guide you in a way that they know works, which is probably following something that they did. And that when everybody around you thinks like that or talks like that, then you're going to naturally believe that. And I think the number one way to overcome that is to surround yourself by people who are doing what you want to do, who think the way you want to think and are where you want to be. That's right. Why networking, conferences, meetups, whatever, and doing it on a regular basis, multiple times a month if you can. Because you go to a networking event, you might be pumped up for like 4 or 5, 6 days afterwards, but then you're going to be like, maybe I can't do this. The doubt sets in again. So you got to be doing something like every week or every other week to kind of keep your like, I'm not just reading about people. I'm not just listening to them on a podcast or seeing them on YouTube. I'm in a room with people who
you're meeting them in person. Right.
That guy, that 28-year-old's got 50 units already. That guy 50-year-old retired 20 years ago because he's got whatever, like you're in the room with them, it's real.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing though, too. I think the reason why people have fear is because they don't have the knowledge. They don't know that they don't know how to put a deal together. They don't know how to talk to someone, how to network with someone, how to talk to a broker. And the only way you learn it is if you actually do it and hang around with people that have done it too, so you can learn from them. I mean, that's essentially it, right? Same way you did it.
Well, absolutely. And you can't be afraid to screw it up.
Right.
Like you're going to make an offer and you're going to get laughed at. Right. And especially in this market now, they're going to be, sometimes the agent won't even submit it. And you have to tell them, it's like, you have to send that to them. Like legally, you have to submit that offer, or you don't want it to end up in the trash, and they'll laugh at you and it's okay. But one time they're gonna be like, yeah, there's no way this is going to happen. They submit it and then it gets accepted.
Yeah.
Like that's all it takes is that one time. Different in a apartment complex, in a multifamily space, you don't want to be submitting all kinds of low balls, but in a single family, small unit space, you can do that. You just got to be okay with being wrong and you adjust. You're going to screw it up. And a lot of people are afraid to like lose face in front of strangers or something like this. Like, I don't know this person. I don't care about like what you think about me. Like, I don't care if you think I'm stupid.
But you know what though? The thing is that from the time that we're kids and we're going to grade school, right? If you made a mistake, you're called out. You have the big red X on the piece of paper, F or whatever it is, right? And so we're so conditioned to be adverse from failure that you don't want to fail at anything. You're afraid to fail at anything at all. And even submitting an LOI that's basically means nothing. And, it could, I shouldn't say means nothing, but it means like, just like I said, it may not get accepted. Well, okay, great. Go to the next one. Not a big deal, right?
Well,
People are afraid.
Well, you
That's
got to
another
learn
reason why
from
they're
it.
afraid. Yeah.
You submit 10 or 20 or 30 offers, they all get rejected. You're like, well, maybe I should go back to my numbers and maybe I'm screwing something up.
Right.
Like, you learn and adapt from it. And you're absolutely right, though. People are terrified to make mistakes. And, I was actually just reading it on Instagram. I saw this just this morning. It's funny you mentioned that. People are like, why do people punish their kids for things that have no repercussions as adults? Like the kid drops the plate and breaks it, and like the parents knock them halfway across the room. Like, but an adult drops and breaks the plate. They're like, oh, where's the broom? Like,
right. You just take care of it. Yeah. It's very strange how we've been conditioned. And that's something that has to change. If you're going to be successful in this business, you have to expect that there's going to be bad days, and it's just overcoming all those bad days to really see success on the other side of it. That's it. And then you learn from it. You don't do it again. That's as simple as that.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you build up your business and process and systems based on those mistakes. I've made definitely, I don't know how much, but in the 6-figure range in mistakes. Like, I've lost a lot of money in hiring the wrong people. Like, fortunately, never buying the wrong asset. Like, I've never lost money on a deal, but I've lost money every other way that you can imagine. And so, but I've made many, many more multiples of it back.
But you're not making those mistakes again.
No, absolutely not.
That's the key, right? You're never going to do that mistake ever again. That's right.
Hopefully.
That's right. Now, if you can give your 20-year-old self a word of advice, what would you tell him?
So the number one thing, my number one regret when I started investing was I was like a lone wolf investor. I really, truly believed that if I told anybody anything that I was doing about real estate, any of my knowledge, I believe somebody's going to steal my next deal. Like I think I used those exact words at some point. Like, I would share nothing with nobody. Like, like a mafia guy, like keep your lips sealed. And I changed that mindset when I got into syndicating, and I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna give first. I'm just gonna give information, knowledge, whatever. And I started that, and I grew more in that 1 year than I had done all my prior years combined. So I realized I had the wrong mindset. And because of that, I never built an investor database from day one. Like, I wasn't doing any of that. And I started six years late or something like that. And so if I could go back, I'd be like, get out there, start networking, change your mindset, build that investor database by adding value to other people first. That's my number one regret.
Yeah, well, you know what, that's excellent advice, though, too. Excellent advice for anyone listening right now. That's awesome. All right, guys. Well, if you want to reach out to Eric, you can reach him via his website at idealrei.com. I hope you got inspired by this, and you see the benefits of starting small and just growing your portfolio. Thanks for your time, man. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the Bulletproof Cashflow podcast.